In case you missed our prep session today for the summit, I just wanted to recap a few quick things. So, why are we the Catholic Social Teaching and Investing Summit? Mother Cabrini is one of the inspirations. She has one of the most extensive networks of Catholic hospitals and institutions. She founded more than 67 in her lifetime, including one that's featured in the film Cabrini, and really recommend that documentary as pre-reading because on November 13th we'll be celebrating her feast day. And the Cabrini sisters today are still one of the leaders in the Catholic impact investing movement today. So really encourage you to understand Mother Cabrini's story in New York, building a hospital that served the rich so she could also serve the poor. Sister Pat Daly is also one of our inspirations. Kate Walsh was one of her proteges. She'll be in the room at the summit. She's part of the Global Impact Investing Network. But Sister Pat Daly led the charge with ExxonMobil, with Ford, with helping companies get out of apartheid in South Africa. She led for all these years the Tri-State Coalition for Responsible Investing that became part of the Interfaith Center on Corporate Responsibility. Such an important story. I'll link to a podcast to listen to get a sense of her legacy. And then finally, Sister Corrine Florek was one of the most committed and dogged advocates for community development finance. She invested in cooperatives in Appalachia. She's one of these Adrian Dominican sisters, and they also have been for 50 years, just celebrated 50 years of impact investing, impact first investing, really believing in we can lend to small businesses throughout this country. She spoke at our last summit. And, but what is Catholic social teaching and how does that connect to investing? So there's these documents around the time of Mother Cabrini, actually, Pope Leo the 13th wrote the first encyclical Rerum Novarum, wrestling with industrialism of the age, uh, capitalism, socialism, wrestling with this. That was one of the first encyclicals. Then we have, Gaudium et Spes, we have Laborum Exertions, Laudato Si, those have been translated by theologians into a set of principles: the common good, option for the poor, care for our common home or integral ecology, and subsidiarity decision making. We've then taken those one step further and we translate them with kind of what three principles: non-maximization, which is kind of the question around like what's fair in the sharing of risk and return. Two, relationship and repair. Basically, you can ask the question, are you adding more value than you're taking as an investor? And third is participation. Who's engaged in the design, the governance, the ownership? Is it the communities, the entrepreneurs, the workers? These are the three principles that we have been spending the past 4 years integrating into workshops. And that's really what this community is about. But how do we begin? It began with a letter from Pope Francis to young economists and entrepreneurs saying, how can we enter into a covenant to change today's economy and give a soul to the economy of tomorrow? I was one of those young people that responded to this and went to Assisi. And since then, we've been asking this question, what does bold embodiment of Catholic social teaching and investing look like? So we have this spectrum from capital supremacy to faith first. And we try to say, how do we move away from externalizing risk, non-participatory design towards funds and investments that have more of this relationality, more participation? We also talk about moving from structures of sin that degrade the earth and build structures that humanize, away from things that dehumanize and exclude the poor from wealth building to ones that are really a more integral ecology, prioritizing the option for the poor, integral human development. We draw on other critiques. These are some of the early Catholic institutional investors that are a part of our community 3, 4 years ago. And our workshops really invited them into a conversation, say, our most important work can't wait. We now have more than 200 alumni, and we've offered 10 of these workshops. And I'm just going to say, when we then apply this in our workshops onto a map, so many people have what they say value screened portfolios or negatively screened compliant with U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. But we see that as pretty far towards the capital supremacy and not moving much towards participation. Whereas with APIS and Heritage or beneficial returns, or you'll hear Buen Vivir Capital Institute pushing towards examples that are both embodying right relationship and faith first investing toward the top right here. That's what our workshops are all about. The beginning of our workshop, we also said it was important to kind of talk about traditional public and private markets as really far over here, very extractive on the left. Then what is ESG? It's aware and less extractive. And then there's no harm, there's impact investing that is beginning to prioritize social and environmental impact while still considering financial returns. That's what we call kind of sustainable or impact. And then the far right is impact first investing, this livable future, direct alternatives, prioritizing building wealth assets for community without focusing on maximum returns for investors. There's some examples of some funds below. We also think it's helpful to visualize most of our conventional status quo faith-based portfolios are here on the left. Almost all of the investments are actually pretty extractive, pretty far on the red spectrum, like we said over here. And then our charity, that's the livable future stuff we do. That's the 5% that we give out every year from our endowments. But on the right, we're trying to show what does a different portfolio look like here. You can actually have some of these livable future investments in your portfolio, and you maybe shift around how negative the return is. Maybe it's only negative 10% loss, negative 20% instead of a negative 100% philanthropy. That's part of the change of what a different portfolio looks like. We also talked today about building maps, and so much of the desire for the summit is say, how do we become more empowered individuals? What are the organizations that exist today or could exist? What are the actions that are needed, are happening? And how to become empowered organizations and empowered coalitions? And so much of our work is drawing on the spectrum. Like, let's say we're here in that little thing, we're an individual. How do we commit to this work of embodying these principles into our investing? And then how do we get our organization to commit? And after we make the commitment, how do we build a sense of excellence in how we are embodying those principles? And then how do we build coalitions to then get orders of magnitude more capital invested from hundreds of thousands to hundreds of millions to hundreds of billions? And that's part of the aspiration. We use this as a framework in one of our early workshops. Today, we've engaged lots of values aligned investors. Some get excited, some kind of make struggle to actually use significant chunks of their portfolios to CST impact fund managers. And that's part of what our summit is about, is helping you live that next step. So we started with this economy of Francesco. How do we become protagonists of transformation? How do we build workshops of hope? We were commissioned by many people in our early workshops, and our ecology has grown. We've had a lot of women religious, a lot of foundations and family offices, the institutional church, faith pension funds, the solidarity economy we'll talk more about, impact first managers, advisors. And then also we merged with the Catholic Impact Investing Collaborative. And just recently this year, we've decided to kind of spin out into four different entities. The Charism Capital is a new pooled vehicle, Livable Future Impact, and also the Catholic Impact Investing Collaborative to have more of a focus on action. Who's here? Who's going to be at the summit? We have some religious congregations. We have Impact First pioneers. We have impact capital managers, prophetic economy leaders. I want to talk more about them. To me, they're the ones that are closest to the cries of the poor and the cries of the earth. And we're called in this economy of Francesco to integrate that with the structural problems of the global economy. And so, to help us with that integration, we have a broader ecosystem of global church partners, theological roundtables, these hubs for convening and field building. You'll meet many of them at our summit. We have lay associates, religious orders that are acting these out. While there's only maybe 60,000 Franciscans in the world. There's actually 600,000 when you add the lay orders, third order Franciscans who have committed, taken a vow to live the Franciscan values and principles. We have some leading authors and thinkers, some investment consultants and OCIOs that'll be in the room. So where we've come, we've launched these workshops, we've built the summit, we have a strong base of investors. We continue to anchor ourselves in our North Stars of 100 impact first investors, 100 catalytic CST aligned investments, and 1,000 spiritually rooted leaders. And that spiritual practice is part of something that we think is so important. We think that we need spiritual practice, we need silence to be able to access our deeper values, to our sense of compassion. And also, we need it to help us reach towards the future that we know we are all capable of. Look forward to seeing you at our summit.